On the day when I was supposed to get the marriage certificate with Ryan, I waited alone at the Civil Affairs Bureau until late at night. He didn't come because his first love had a relapse of her heart disease and he spent the whole day with her. That night, he ran 3 red lights in a row and sped in his car to buy medicine for her. At the 3rd red light, he hit and killed a person. That person was me. In the 7th year of being with Ryan, he said that he would give me a home. Astra, wait for me at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow morning. I promise it will be a pleasant surprise. On the phone, his voice was as gentle as ever, gentle enough to drown people in it. For the sake of this surprise he mentioned, I held back the good news that I originally wanted to tell him and was so excited that I didn't sleep a wink all night. God knows how happy I was that night. I was so happy that I got up very early the next day and waited at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau from early morning until it got dark. I kept moving back from the first place in the line until the last couple passed by me. I looked at the locked door. Well, there was no need to move back anymore. The wind in early summer was still chilly, making people's eyes feel sour as if something was about to fall. When my cell phone rang, I held back my tears and hurriedly opened the phone, almost in a fluster. Ryan hadn't answered my calls or replied to my messages all day. I thought it would be him this time. And it should have been him. However, a strange number popped up in the notification bar. I didn't want to look at it carefully at first, but the word Ryan in the message still made me hold my breath. Subconsciously, I clicked on the message. Silas is just a toy for passing the time in terms of emotions. Do you really think Ryan will marry you? Why don't you guess who the man you've been waiting for all day is with? Silas. Ryan, as the name implies, refers to Ryan. There was a lump in my throat. I gritted my teeth, looked away, and put away my phone. However, that gust of wind in the summer night still blew ripples of pain in my heart. The street lamps turned on at the scheduled time. The pedestrians around were in a hurry, but I didn't move. I stubbornly looked ahead. Ryan had never lied to me. He said he would come, so he surely would. But I kept waiting. I waited until the lights were on, until the moon rose above the willow trees, but that figure never appeared at the end of the road. Are you still going to wait? Rosalind, who had been with me all day, now had a face darker than the sky that had darkened above our heads. I shuddered and hid my hands in the pockets of my coat, where a handful of wedding candies that I had prepared last night, symbolizing the beginning of my happiness with Ryan, were weighing heavily in my pocket. Among the wedding candies was a list from the hospital. I felt a bit relieved when I touched these things. Of course I'll wait. Ryan would never have thought that I also had a surprise for him. I tried my best to force a smile and reached out to touch my lower abdomen. The result I got yesterday showed that this healthy little one was already 2 months old. My happiness was about to begin. Rosalind was completely angry. Astra, are you out of your mind? How can you still laugh? I knew she was angry. She was angry that Ryan had made a promise to me but stood me up, and angry that I had been waiting for him like a fool all day but still wouldn't give up. However, I was going to have a home soon. I would have a husband who loved me, a child who was connected to me by blood and whose bond with me could never be severed in this life. I could also have a family. This was the lifelong longing of Astra, who had been alone in the world for 24 years. How could I not smile? I took out the wedding candies that I hadn't given away at all today and stuffed them into Rosalind's hand, trying to make her happier. He has just taken over the company and is really busy with it. It doesn't matter if we postpone getting the marriage certificate. I'll try calling him again. Ryan, he won't lie to me. Astra, don't be silly. She didn't take the wedding candies. Instead, she held up her phone in front of me, feeling both angry and helpless. Ryan's efforts are not spent on work at all. Stop deceiving yourself. All his energy is clearly given to his childhood sweetheart, that sickly first love. Since his first love returned to the country a month ago, haven't you noticed? His heart has long flown to her side. The cold-tone screen flashed in front of my eyes. The man I had been looking forward to all day finally appeared in my sight. However, it was on the phone, appearing in Rosalind's WeChat moments with various expressions and actions. To be more precise, it was in the WeChat moments of his first love, Jocelyn, who had just returned to the country a month ago. Rosalind's expression was as disgusted as if she had eaten a fly. I added Jocelyn with a small account. Do you know that while you were standing here stupidly waiting for him, he spent the whole day with Jocelyn in the hospital? Jocelyn posted more than 10 WeChat moments. She took pictures from morning till night, and all from a girlfriend's perspective. Those who didn't know would think that they were the couple, and he even said he would marry you. I don't think he takes you seriously at all. I was stunned. The fingers in my pocket grabbed a wedding candy and tightened gradually. My gaze was fixed on the face of my boyfriend of 7 years, photographed from various angles on the screen. There were pictures taken from the side of him, showing him sitting on a chair with a gentle look while peeling an apple. There were pictures taken from a low angle, showing him holding a mobile phone that was playing a TV series with his hand as a support. There were also pictures of him leaning against the bedside, his eyes fixed on the woman in the bed, pretending to be asleep. There were more than 10 pictures in a row, each one ambiguous, and the shooting angles were extremely intimate. The clothes he was wearing were still the ones I gave him. The smile on my face completely froze. My eyes were almost dried by the wind, hurting as if they were about to split open. Rosalind swiped the screen with her finger. The latest WeChat moment popped up at the top. It was still a combination of pictures and words. In the picture, Ryan was holding a transparent infusion tube with both hands, and his handsome face showed helplessness. Silas said that this man was going to get the marriage certificate today. I just casually complained that my hand was so cold from the infusion. Unexpectedly, he didn't even go to get married and just sat here warming the infusion tube for me for several hours. Poor the bride-to-be is still waiting for him bitterly. Those who know him, please help me tell that girl that it was he who refused to leave. It's not my fault. Silas, something in my heart was torn to pieces by an invisible big hand. I thought Ryan really wanted to marry me. I thought he wouldn't lie to me. In this month, there were quite a few people around me who were sneering and waiting to see me abandoned and make fun of me. I also thought that he wanted to break those baseless rumors with his actions. He said that Jocelyn had had a heart disease since childhood and had stayed alone abroad for 7 years for treatment. He took more care of her just because he regarded her as a sister and felt sorry for her. I believed all of that. Even though I could smell the strange fragrance of gardenias on him every day and my heart was bleeding with pain, I forced myself to believe it. But in the end, there were no baseless rumors at all. Everyone else had been sober in this month, but only I, Astra, was the biggest fool in the world, deceiving myself from the beginning to the end. I touched my lower abdomen. The 2-month-old belly hadn't shown yet. I just felt that my eyes were so sour that it hurt. Rosalind noticed that my expression was wrong and frowned as she turned the phone away. Just one look, and she almost threw the phone to the ground in anger. Damn it. What a pair of scumbags. How unlucky. I'll catch them in bed today. I won't believe it if I don't tear them apart. Rosalind ground her teeth angrily and pulled me to catch them in the act. The candies in my pocket were pulled out and dropped to the ground, along with the pregnancy test B ultrasound list. I bent down to pick them up, but my tears fell on the list faster than my hands. Rosalind picked up the list first. What are you going to do with this child? Her eyes were also red, and her voice was a bit hoarse. I took the list and unfolded it, carefully wiping away the tears on it. The embryo was so small that others couldn't find it without looking carefully. But I had held the list and looked at it over and over again last night, and the position of the embryo was already imprinted in my mind. I said, Rosalind, I'm an abandoned baby who has been left in the orphanage since birth. I long for a family, and I've never thought that I would become a person who abandons a child, even if it's just an unformed embryo now. A hint of reluctance flashed in Rosalind's eyes. However, I made up my mind, put the list away, and tried my best to make my voice sound normal. Rosalind, you can go back first. I want to take a walk alone. Rosalind knew how stubborn I was. She let out a sigh but still told me worriedly, then go back early. Be sure to call me if anything happens. Okay. My voice was already shaking uncontrollably. The tear hanging from the corner of my eye didn't fall until she turned around and left. Watching the lights on in thousands of households, I was surrounded by them, but not a single bright light was on for me. The wedding candies and the list were still lying quietly in my pocket. I still remembered the joy and excitement when I stuffed them into my pocket one by one this morning. I thought that Astra, who had grown up in the orphanage without parents, had finally welcomed her own moon at the age of 24 and waited for the home that could accommodate her. But why? Why can't I escape the fate of being abandoned in this life? Is Astra really such a terrible person? Under the white dress, my heart was so sour that it hurt. I grabbed a wedding candy in my palm. There was still a child in my belly, so I didn't dare to let my emotions fluctuate too much. But those pictures kept playing in my mind like a TV series. An invisible big hand was tightly gripping my throat, trying to deprive me of my last breath of oxygen. I didn't know where to go. Probably still not giving up, I dialed Ryan's number again and again like self-torture. Every time the mechanical female voice came from the phone, my breathing through my nose and mouth became weaker, and my hand on my lower abdomen tightened little by little. At the waiting area in the middle of the crossroads, I swallowed my tears when I saw the red light turn green and finally firmly chose the road back to my apartment. Since I couldn't get through on the phone, Ryan would always have to go back home. I wanted to ask him why he broke his promise. Why did he give me hope and then let me down? It wasn't 7 days or 7 months between us. It was a full 7 years of being together day and night. And there was this child. The green light started blinking. I was in a hurry to take a picture of the pregnancy test list and was about to send it to Ryan when my eyes were dazzled by the bright headlights of a car. Everything happened so suddenly. Bang, I saw that the car coming at high speed didn't slow down at all. I saw Ryan's anxious face behind the car window. I saw the wedding candies, the pregnancy test list, and my phone flying out together. I instinctively reached out to protect my lower abdomen and watched helplessly as the things that slipped out of my hand were getting farther and farther away from me. The moment they hit the ground, the wedding candies in my pocket scattered all over the ground. I heard a sharp sound of sudden braking. The phone hit the ground near a telegraph pole not far from me. Before the screen went black, the picture of the pregnancy test list hadn't been sent out yet. Pain. The sharp pain spread from all over my body, especially in my stomach. I was in so much pain that I could hardly breathe. There was something warm flowing out from my lower body. No, don't. I was completely panicked. Help. Someone help me. Save my child. The hit-and-run vehicle had already driven a certain distance away. I painfully grabbed the ground and crawled forward step by step, leaving a trail of blood behind me. My sanity completely collapsed. I could feel the child leaving me bit by bit. With the last desperate roar, my vision suddenly went black, and my soul seemed to be torn apart. When I could see again, I had already floated into the air. But I clearly wasn't dead. The pain was still there, and the body on the ground was still heaving. I had never been so panicked and helpless. The face I saw when I was hit flashed through my mind, and I immediately floated towards the car. I had to save myself. I had to save my child. In the car, Ryan seemed to still be in a daze. I endured the severe pain in my soul, crying and shouting at him with all my strength, Ryan. Ryan, get out of the car quickly. Save me. Save our child. Probably because there was blood in my throat, it was extremely difficult for me to say every word. Soon, my voice was drowned out by a rapid ringtone. Ryan didn't respond to my cries for help, but he answered the phone immediately. Unlike my despair and pain, Ryan's face was full of tenderness when he answered the phone. Eneen, don't be afraid. You won't die. I'll be able to bring the medicine back soon. The pain will go away soon. Eneen? Jocelyn? I was stunned. My mind went blank at that moment. Those text messages, pictures, and captions that had been covered by the pain came to the surface again, emerging in my mind one by one. If only Ryan could get out of the car and take a look, he would find me lying in a pool of blood. But he didn't. He comforted Jocelyn on the other end of the phone and took the time to push the man in the passenger seat. Raymond, go and see if we hit something. If so, quickly pay for it, call the police and handle it as you should. Your sister is still waiting for the medicine. Don't waste time. Jocelyn, 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 it was always Jocelyn. Even at a time like this, every word and sentence from Ryan was still about his concern for Jocelyn. What about me? What am I? What did our 7 years mean? During the day he spent with Jocelyn, did he think of me for a moment? Did he remember his promise? Did he remember that there was a woman named Astra waiting for him all day long at the entrance of the Civil Affairs Bureau? Eneen, don't cry. He said gently. Those affectionate Eneen, one after another, hit my ears, breaking my heart into pieces. Ryan, it hurts. It wasn't just Jocelyn who was in pain. I was in pain too. Why only save her and not me? Why? I covered my lower abdomen, feeling extremely desperate. For so many years, was love fake? Was affection fake? So was I really just a toy for Ryan to pass the time during the 7 years when Jocelyn was abroad? What answered me was the man in the car's comforting words, one softer than the other. So many words, but not a single one was for me. Rosalind was absolutely right. I was the stupidest fool in the world. At this moment, there was no greater sorrow than the death of the heart. In my chest, that love seemed to give birth to something else. I watched the man named Raymond get out of the car. I knew that Jocelyn had a younger brother. But at this moment, it didn't matter who it was, as long as someone could save me. I could feel my heartbeat. I knew that I wasn't dead, and neither was my child. As long as they saved me, I could still live, and so could my child. I followed Raymond to where my body was. The pure white dress and the bright red blood looked particularly eerie under the flickering streetlights. I was lying in a pool of blood, and the hem of my dress had already been dyed dark. Raymond was obviously startled by this scene. Especially after seeing my face clearly, he ran back to the car as if he had seen a ghost. I let out a sigh of relief and followed closely behind. There should still be time. As long as my child and I could survive, for the rest of my life, I could take my child and stay far away from Ryan. I wasn't the kind of person who would pester others. I had never fought for anything in my life. A child without parents had no background since childhood. After getting beaten a lot, I understood that if I couldn't get something, it was okay to let it go. After all, I was an orphan with no one to support me. Raymond suppressed his panic and walked to the car casually as if he had suddenly become a different person. A sense of uneasiness flashed through my mind, and the next second I heard him sneer softly, Brother Yen, I've checked. It was just a dog that got hit and killed. It's not a big deal. I'll ask someone to deal with it later. My sister is still waiting for you to bring her the medicine. I stared at the man dressed in famous brands in disbelief, and my whole soul froze in place. He didn't want to save me? I had never thought that human evil could reach such an extent. Raymond walked through my soul to the driver's seat. He knocked on the car window and showed an innocent smile. Brother Yen, I think you're not in a good state. Why don't I drive the rest of the way? To avoid any accidents. This time we were lucky that only a dog was killed. It would be bad if we hit a person next time. Behind that harmless expression was a bloodthirsty and sinister look. I didn't miss the fleeting fierceness in his eyes. Something exploded in my mind. No. He wanted to kill me. Panic swept over me and the overwhelming fear almost drowned me. No. I rushed to Ryan like crazy and desperately called for help. Ryan, I'm begging you, please don't change. I'll die. He'll kill me. I was scared, really scared. I didn't want anything anymore. Ryan, I don't want you to marry me anymore. I just want my child. As long as my child and I can survive, I can leave. I can step aside so that you can marry Jocelyn without any worries. I promise I won't cause you any trouble at all. I can raise the child by myself. For the sake of the 7 years that I've loved you with all my heart, please save me, save the child. When I get better, I'll disappear. I'll disappear completely from your sight, okay? My voice was scattered by the wind in early summer. In the whole world, it seemed that only I could hear my own voice. Ryan had already unbuckled his seatbelt and was about to get out of the car. I wanted to hold his hand, but in my soul state, I couldn't touch anything at all. I could only wail in despair, watching helplessly as Ryan got out of the car, watching him send messages on his phone while walking around to the front of the car, watching him step on and crush a wedding candy without a care. It seemed that God was playing a huge joke on me. The wedding candies that hadn't been given away, the person who didn't show up, and the picture of the pregnancy test list that was about to be sent but was interrupted by a car accident and frozen a second before sending. I didn't complain much before. I always thought that it was better to endure hardships earlier in life. Once you've endured all the hardships, the rest would be blessings. But there isn't always a rainbow after the rain, and the sun doesn't always come out the next day. After going through so many hardships, I only understood now that once a person's suffering starts, there will be no end. Raymond got his wish and sat in the driver's seat. My throat was hoarse from shouting. I looked at the crushed wedding candy in despair. That was the one that had flown out of my hand. The pain of my soul being torn apart swept over me again. Before I could do anything else, I was cruelly pulled back into my body. Discomfort came over me. I lay helplessly on the ground, spat out a mouthful of blood in a mess, and couldn't move anymore. The pain on my body seemed to be magnified countless times, and it was excruciating. The car made a U-turn in front. In my pupils was reflected the small car speeding towards me. In the car, Ryan was always looking down at his phone. Was Jocelyn really that important? The moment the car ran over me, despair and great pain flooded in like a tide. I protected my stomach. Even though I knew it was in vain, I had to let my child know that he wasn't abandoned and that Mom really loved him. The white dress was soaked in scarlet in an instant. I stared fixedly at the car in front, and my vision was also dyed red. In my ears, the evening bell in the city rang 3 times. It was like a death knell, announcing that Astra's life was forever fixed on this day when she was 24 years old. At the moment before death, I had never hated so much. I hated the unfairness of God, hated Raymond's cruelty, and even more hated Ryan's betrayal and deception. Probably because of the surging hatred, when I opened my eyes again, I actually saw Ryan. He was leaning against the passenger seat with a pale face, his big hand tightly covering his heart, as if he had just experienced something extremely painful. Raymond glanced back at him while driving. Brother Yen? Is your heart okay? Why did it suddenly hurt? You look quite bad. Do you want to go for a checkup later? No need. Ryan struggled to let out a breath and took his hand away, but his brows were still tightly furrowed. After hesitating for a moment, he looked back again, and his tone was somewhat unusually dull. Did you drag the dog to the side just now? When the matter just now was mentioned, Raymond's face didn't look good. Oh, it was just a dog. It's dead, so be it. My sister is still waiting for this medicine to relieve the pain. Brother Yen, could it be that in your heart, my sister isn't as important as a dog? As soon as he said this, my eyes gradually turned scarlet. Hatred spread uncontrollably in my heart, growing wildly like vines. Why? Why? Why was Jocelyn's life a life, while Astra's life wasn't? Why did he drive over me? Why did he want to kill me? Why didn't he save me? Countless whys rushed into my mind and made it blank. I rushed at him like crazy and tried to choke his neck. Why should the murderer with blood on his hands live a good life? Why was God always so unfair? But it was useless. It was completely useless. No matter how many times I tried, I could only watch helplessly as my hands passed through Raymond's body. Just like when he drove over me, I couldn't protect myself, couldn't protect my child in my belly. I was completely powerless. Even though he had just killed a person in such a cruel way, he was still sitting there calmly. I couldn't even touch a single hair of his. You see, God was just so unfair. He was used to bullying the weak. Ryan suddenly responded beside me. It should be a response to what Raymond had said before. He was still just looking down at his phone. Several times he scrolled through his WeChat moments, but for some reason, I didn't see any of the things that Jocelyn had sent in his WeChat moments. But what did it matter? He had spent a day with her, and that was an indisputable fact. Ryan checked the text message interface several times. Apparently, he didn't see what he wanted to see. While Jocelyn was picked up by Ryan in a panic and he ran to find a doctor, she had a better life than me. I was pulled by an invisible rope and followed behind them. The heart examination was too complicated. I watched behind them for as long as Ryan accompanied Jocelyn. The sky was gradually turning white. During this period, I even watched a bit of excitement by the way. In the ward next to Jocelyn's, I heard that a seriously ill patient with a heart disease escaped right under the nurses' noses. This scared many medical staff. I smacked my lips as if to relieve my boredom. Anyway, maybe my body would be gnawed by dogs in the next second. I didn't want to be furious but powerless. I was so tired. It would be better to just wait quietly for my disappearance. Once I disappeared, I would be free. Just as I was thinking this, that invisible pulling feeling came again. I let out a sigh and resigned myself to being pulled away. Somehow, I was looking forward to disappearing quickly. Ryan's face was so irritating that I didn't want to keep looking at it. Being invisible, inaudible, and disappearing into the world would be better than now. The second before being pulled away from that ward, I caught a glimpse of a name, Silas. Such a familiar name. I frowned and wanted to take another look, but my soul was uncontrollably pulled away. I was unwilling and searched in my mind for a while, but unfortunately, I found nothing and had to give up reluctantly. Ryan found the doctor on duty at night and asked about Jocelyn's condition. He really cared about her all the time. Maybe I had seen too much at once. At this moment, when I had this awareness again, apart from a bit of sourness and discomfort in my chest, I didn't have any more emotions. Ryan's brows had been furrowed with worry all night. Doctor, her heart always hurts. Could there be any other problems? Do we need to do a full body examination again? The doctor looked at the examination sheet and didn't react much. It's not as serious as you said. She had a heart transplant long ago and has passed the rejection period. She just had a full body examination half a month ago. As long as she follows the doctor's advice, rests on time, eats regularly, doesn't do strenuous exercise, and isn't frightened, there won't be any problems. Ryan grasped the key point and his expression changed. Had a heart transplant? Yes, didn't you know? The doctor took out a film and pointed to a place to show him. This heart belongs to a young man. It's very healthy. Ryan's face changed visibly in an instant. Was he deceived? I kind of wanted to laugh. Is this karma? Ryan took the sheet and went back to the ward. Jocelyn still didn't know anything. When she saw him coming, she covered her heart and wept pitifully. Ryan, I'm so pained. She was crying and reached out to pull Ryan as she used to do, but he coldly dodged. Jocelyn was stunned and her hand froze awkwardly in place. Ryan, is it fun to deceive me? What? What? Panic flashed in Jocelyn's eyes. Ryan coldly threw the sheet onto the bed, his eyes seeming to see through her. The doctor said that you had already had a heart transplant and got a very healthy heart long ago. All the examination results show that your heart is fine now. You pretended to be sick to make me stay. Why? To stop me from getting married? Or to deliberately make Astra angry? No. Jocelyn shook her head in panic. Ryan interrupted her and coldly warned, if you dare to say another word to deceive me, I promise that I will never see you again in my life. These words made Jocelyn completely panicked. She grabbed Ryan's hand regardless and cried pitifully, Ryan, I just love you. Otherwise, how could I joke with my own body? Ryan didn't show any sign of being moved at all. He said word by word in a solemn tone, but you know that I hate deception the most, Jocelyn. I only regard you as my sister. I took care of you just because of this. If I had known you had such thoughts earlier, I wouldn't have come. I will only marry Astra in my life. Just a sister? Again with this line. I couldn't help but laugh sarcastically. Is self-deception contagious? I may be stupid, but I'm not blind. Ryan put it in such a high-sounding way, but the look in his eyes when he looked at Jocelyn was really not innocent. I floated beside him and stared at his face that had once made my heart flutter countless times, letting that numb heart grow colder and colder until it completely became the temperature that a dead person's heart should have. What a pity. I had loved him so wholeheartedly, but he was here, doing one disgusting thing after another under the pretext of being a brother. I can't deny that he was nice to me before. Maybe Ryan loved me, but that must not be all of his love. Otherwise, how could he have done those ambiguous things with his so-called sister while loving me? He loves me, and he also loves Jocelyn. His love can be broken into many pieces and distributed one by one, but he himself doesn't even realize it. He can even proudly claim his deep affection. The moment my mind became clear, something in my chest suddenly dawned on me. I found that the invisible thread connecting Ryan and me suddenly disappeared. No matter how far away he was from me, I wouldn't be affected anymore. Watching the moment when he shook off Jocelyn and turned to leave, I just felt relieved. relieved that I didn't have to be tied to Ryan anymore. But I didn't disappear. 6 hours had passed since Raymond made that phone call saying that he would chop my body into pieces. What kind of ghost marriage ceremony would take so long? I was just feeling confused when Raymond came. Jocelyn wasn't crying anymore. The moment she met Raymond's eyes, I saw a familiar fierceness in her eyes. She pulled Raymond and laughed sinisterly. Tell your people to destroy that Astra, no matter what way. How dare she snatch the man I, Jocelyn, have my eye on? I'll make her regret it for the rest of her life. They really were siblings of the same ilk. Such a pretty, fair face suddenly became somewhat disgusting. Raymond reassured her, sister, what do you think I went out for just now? That woman is already dead. No one will compete with you for Ryan anymore. Jocelyn laughed, looking so smug that her tail seemed about to stick up in the air. It's good that she's dead. It saves me the trouble. Now, I'd like to see how Ryan can marry her. A dead person can never compete with a living one. I firmly remembered the disgusting looks of these two siblings. Since I hadn't disappeared until now, did it mean that I still had time? At least I could seek justice for myself and for my unborn child. I left the ward wanting to find the man who could see me. He was the only one who could help me now. Surprisingly, it went very smoothly this time. However, why was he covered in blood? Could gods bleed too? I watched him stagger forward and finally fall weakly at the door of the neighboring ward, gasping for breath with difficulty. I tentatively floated over. He looked like he should still be able to call the police for me, right? That man seemed to have eyes on his forehead. As soon as I got close to him, he suddenly raised his head, almost scaring me out of my wits. You? He choked on his breath and didn't finish his sentence. Suddenly, he covered his heart painfully. Are you okay? I was startled and quickly went forward to support him. Fortunately, he could touch me and I could touch him too. He painfully tried to reach for something in his pocket. I understood and took out a bottle of medicine from his pocket and fed it to him. I recognized that medicine. I had seen it beside Jocelyn's bedside table. It was for treating heart problems. No wonder his face was so pale when I first saw him. On the way, a passing nurse took him back to the ward. While supporting him, the nurse kept muttering something. However, I caught the key point in her words. Silas. So he was the escaped patient. I'm okay. He took a long time to recover on the bed. His voice came through the oxygen mask, answering the question I had asked before. Somehow, that sense of familiarity made me feel nostalgic. He looked at me, his eyebrows and eyes curving down. Fortunately, you're okay too. Our eyes met. When I caught sight of the red string on his wrist, something suddenly exploded in my mind. Because I used to have an identical one, which I threw away in a fit of anger later. Before I could open my mouth to ask, Silas interrupted me first, and his gaze became even softer. Astra, you've protected me so many times before. This time, it's finally my turn to protect you. I'm glad that I'm not too late this time. You won't be forced into a ghost marriage, and you won't be chopped into pieces. Astra, you're free. However, considering how hard I've tried to help you, how about giving it a try with me in the next life? I've been waiting for you for such a long time. Next time, I definitely won't be a coward. Don't worry. I won't make you wait. As long as you turn around, I'll surely be right behind you, no matter when. Later, I realized that there were no gods in this world. Silas could see me because he was dying, a dying man, who was thinking about me until his last moment, and then he really saw me. He got covered in blood because he tried to stop that so-called ghost marriage for me. He called the police, but he thought the police were too slow. I don't know how he found me, but that absurd ghost marriage was really stopped by him. The price was his already short life. When I floated beside his coffin and looked at his face, I wondered if he would become a soul like me. Then I could ask him why he never came to find me after leaving the orphanage. What did it mean that he had been waiting for me for such a long time? And what did it mean by not being a coward? I met Silas in the Tongshin orphanage 20 years ago. The year I met him, his name was still Yu. I asked him, and he said that he chose the name himself. He said it meant the redundant moon. There would always be only one moon in the sky, but it wouldn't be him. Like me, he was also a poor abandoned child. Because of his heart disease, he was abandoned in the snow in the middle of winter. Since then, there had been a little follower behind me, a little follower who would only hide behind me and cry when being bullied. He was luckier than me. He was adopted in the 3rd year after coming to the orphanage. That red string was given to me by him. It was cut from the blanket that wrapped him when he was a baby. He said that with this, he could find me at a glance among countless people in the future, but he broke his promise. Contrary to fairy tales, this was reality. I didn't have such a dreamy life, and I wouldn't wait for the person who would never show up. However, if I had known earlier that he experienced the pain of being abandoned again in the 2nd year after being adopted because his adoptive mother got pregnant, I think I definitely wouldn't have thrown away that red string in a fit of anger. His funeral was very simple. There were no relatives or friends. The eulogy just simply told his life story. His so-called adoptive parents just brought a boy with red-dyed hair to go through the motions. There were no tears, no sadness, and no one was heartbroken for him. Just like his sad life, he came into this world with nothing and left cleanly. Only this time, there was an extra red bond in his hand. A bond with Astra. Before leaving, I floated to the side of the eulogy manuscript and took one last look. The familiar junior high school, and university. Our life trajectories almost overlapped. Suddenly, I thought of the gifts that I had always received inexplicably over the years, the bread and milk that always appeared on my desk in time when I was hungry, and the notebooks that I regarded as gifts from the god of exams before exams. I had imagined many people, but never thought of him. Silas said that with that string, he could find me at a glance among countless people. What about these years? During the years when he was a coward following me, without that red string, how long did it take him to find me? And how come I didn't notice his existence at all? Clearly, he was still as sickly as before. Astra. Astra. He gently kissed the woman beneath him, constantly calling my name. At that moment, it felt like all the blood in my body was flowing backwards. I thought I had already forgotten the pain of being betrayed. But at this moment, all the pain and unwillingness grew wildly like thorns, and the sharp thorns stabbed at my silent heart, making it bleed again. Disgusting. Disgusting. So disgusting. I curled up into a ball and hid beside the bay window, biting my lip until it bled. Why did he have to call my name? Disgusting. Jocelyn was as disgusted as I was. She dug her palms until they bled. However, she endured it and endured the man's advances on her again and again, as if as long as she endured this time the final victory would be waiting for her. I don't understand. Does loving someone mean having to belittle oneself? Is such love really love? I covered my ears even tighter. The urge to vomit that churned in my stomach made my face turn pale. I don't remember when the noise in my ears stopped. I sat blankly beside the bay window until the sky brightened. Clearly, the sun was so hot. I tried to move my whole body under the sun as much as possible. But it wasn't enough. It was so cold, bone-chilling cold. The person on the bed slowly woke up. I tortured myself by turning my head. Ryan had been calling Astra all night. I was curious. What would his reaction be when he opened his eyes and saw that the person beside him was Jocelyn? Jocelyn also woke up. She shyly pulled the quilt and her voice was hoarse and charming when she spoke. Ryan, last night we. Just tell me. How much money do you want? Ryan's face was covered with a layer of frost, and the words that came out of his mouth mercilessly pushed Jocelyn into the abyss. Ryan. What do you mean? Shouldn't you marry me? Be responsible for me? Her face turned completely pale. That so-called victory dragged her into the abyss when she was full of expectations. There was no trace of heartache on Ryan's face anymore. I've said that I'll only marry Astra. I watched helplessly as Jocelyn became the most ridiculous clown. Was it satisfying? I covered my heart. It was still oozing blood bit by bit, but I thought it should be a relief. Jocelyn still wanted to struggle, but the door of the hotel was being banged on loudly. I had a hunch that behind that door would be a new round of hell. The hell belonging to Ryan and Jocelyn. The moment I saw Rosalind rush in with a large group of reporters, my thought was confirmed. Rosalind managed to get him and Jocelyn on the top of the hot search list on the grounds that Ryan, the president of the group, ignored the law and had relations with a woman in a certain profession. The pictures that dominated the list showed the two of them standing beside the bed in disheveled clothes and unable to cover up in time. Jocelyn, who used to be a proud daughter of heaven, was disgraced overnight. Words like, knowing someone was in a relationship and still getting involved, being a slut for money, made her the target of public criticism. In the police station, Ryan was still struggling to explain the misunderstanding of last night. Jocelyn, however, seemed to have grasped a life-saving straw. A shrewd look of determination flashed in her teary eyes. Things aren't like this. What happened last night was all voluntary on my part. There was no such thing as a deal, nor any coercion. Excuse me for interrupting. Before she could finish her act, another group of policemen knocked on the door and walked in. Glancing at Jocelyn and Ryan, the leading policeman had an inherent air of authority without even getting angry. Instead of explaining these things, you two might as well tell me where you were respectively when Miss Astra had the accident. Murder is much more seriously punished than these. Rosalind was standing at the boundary between light and darkness. She probably already knew the news of my death. Such a strong-willed person crying was especially contagious, and my nose also felt sour. I didn't care what the result would be for the people inside. I wasn't curious about what Ryan's expression would be when he learned of my death either. I just felt heartbroken for my friend who had been with me for so many years. But what could I do? The current Astra was so useless that I couldn't even do something as simple as wiping my good friend's tears. Miss Astra, did it hurt terribly? The police said it was a second hit and run. That damn beast. She squatted down, covered her mouth, and finally let her tears fall openly. Don't you think it would have been better if I had stubbornly stayed with you that night? If it hadn't been for that Silas who called the police, how long would you have had to stay alone in the wilderness? Silas. When I heard this name again, my eyes became even more sour. I remembered that bright smiling face and that person who was lying quietly in the coffin, as if just asleep. As if about to be submerged by waves, Rosalind was crying in the light, and I squatted beside her, covering my eyes and crying in the dark. I couldn't tell why I was crying. The tears of a soul were cold, without a trace of warmth, but they burned my palms painfully. In a trance, I heard Ryan's desperate and low growl coming from the room behind me. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. How could it be me? How could I be the one who killed Astra with my own hands? His emotions were pushed to the edge of the cliff by a blurry surveillance video. The policeman mercilessly gave him the final blow while standing at the edge of the cliff. This is what was shown on the deceased's cell phone before death. Astra. 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 He gently kissed the woman beneath him, constantly calling my name. At that moment, it felt like all the blood in my body was flowing backwards. I thought I had already forgotten the pain of being betrayed, but at this moment, all the pain and unwillingness grew wildly like thorns, and the sharp thorns stabbed at my silent heart, making it bleed again. Disgusting. Disgusting. So disgusting. I curled up into a ball and hid beside the bay window, biting my lip until it bled. Why did he have to call my name? Disgusting. Jocelyn was as disgusted as I was. She dug her palms until they bled. However, she endured it and endured the man's advances on her again and again, as if as long as she endured this time, the final victory would be waiting for her. I don't understand. Does loving someone mean having to belittle oneself? Is such love really love? I covered my ears even tighter. The urge to vomit that churned in my stomach made my face turn pale. I don't remember when the noise in my ears stopped. I sat blankly beside the bay window until the sky brightened. Clearly, the sun was so hot. I tried to move my whole body under the sun as much as possible. But it wasn't enough. It was so cold, bone-chilling cold. The person on the bed slowly woke up. I tortured myself by turning my head. Ryan had been calling Astra all night. I was curious. What would his reaction be when he opened his eyes and saw that the person beside him was Jocelyn? Jocelyn also woke up. She shyly pulled the quilt, and her voice was hoarse and charming when she spoke. Ryan, last night we. Just tell me. How much money do you want? Ryan's face was covered with a layer of frost, and the words that came out of his mouth mercilessly pushed Jocelyn into the abyss. Ryan. What do you mean? Shouldn't you marry me? Be responsible for me? Her face turned completely pale. That so-called victory dragged her into the abyss when she was full of expectations. There was no trace of heartache on Ryan's face anymore. I've said that I'll only marry Astra. I watched helplessly as Jocelyn became the most ridiculous clown. Was it satisfying? I covered my heart. It was still oozing blood bit by bit, but I thought it should be a relief. Jocelyn still wanted to struggle, but the door of the hotel was being banged on loudly. I had a hunch that behind that door would be a new round of hell. The hell belonging to Ryan and Jocelyn. The moment I saw Rosalind rush in with a large group of reporters, my thought was confirmed. Rosalind managed to get him and Jocelyn on the top of the hot search list on the grounds that Ryan, the president of the group, ignored the law and had relations with a woman in a certain profession. The pictures that dominated the list showed the two of them standing beside the bed in disheveled clothes and unable to cover up in time. Jocelyn, who used to be a proud daughter of heaven, was disgraced overnight. Words like, knowing someone was in a relationship and still getting involved, being a slut for money, made her the target of public criticism. In the police station, Ryan was still struggling to explain the misunderstanding of last night. Jocelyn, however, seemed to have grasped a life-saving straw. A shrewd look of determination flashed in her teary eyes. Things aren't like this. What happened last night was all voluntary on my part. There was no such thing as a deal, nor any coercion. Excuse me for interrupting. Before she could finish her act, another group of policemen knocked on the door and walked in. Glancing at Jocelyn and Ryan, the leading policeman had an inherent air of authority without even getting angry. Instead of explaining these things, you two might as well tell me where you were respectively when Miss Astra had the accident. Murder is much more seriously punished than these. Rosalind was standing at the boundary between light and darkness. She probably already knew the news of my death. Such a strong-willed person crying was especially contagious, and my nose also felt sour. I didn't care what the result would be for the people inside. I wasn't curious about what Ryan's expression would be when he learned of my death either. I just felt heartbroken for my friend who had been with me for so many years. But what could I do? The current Astra was so useless that I couldn't even do something as simple as wiping my good friend's tears. Miss Astra, did it hurt terribly? The police said it was a second hit and run. That damn beast. She squatted down, covered her mouth, and finally let her tears fall openly. Don't you think it would have been better if I had stubbornly stayed with you that night? If it hadn't been for that Silas who called the police, how long would you have had to stay alone in the wilderness? Silas. When I heard this name again, my eyes became even more sour. I remembered that bright smiling face and that person who was lying quietly in the coffin, as if just asleep. As if about to be submerged by waves. Rosalind was crying in the light, and I squatted beside her, covering my eyes and crying in the dark. I couldn't tell why I was crying. The tears of a soul were cold, without a trace of warmth, but they burned my palms painfully. In a trance, I heard Ryan's desperate and low growl coming from the room behind me. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. How could it be me? How could I be the one who killed Astra with my own hands? His emotions were pushed to the edge of the cliff by a blurry surveillance video. The policeman mercilessly gave him the final blow while standing at the edge of the cliff. This is what was shown on the deceased's cell phone before death. I knew better than anyone else what it was. It was a pregnancy test report of the child in my womb that was about to be sent out. As expected, the last string in Ryan's mind completely snapped. I heard him questioning Jocelyn like crazy, asking her and her brother why they were so cruel, asking Raymond why he didn't save me when I was dying, why he had to destroy my last glimmer of hope, and why he told him that only a dog had been hit and killed. He even rushed out to question Rosalind, asking her why she didn't accompany me that night. He questioned everyone hysterically except himself. I should have seen it clearly long ago. How could such a person deserve my love and dedication for 7 years? Suddenly, I was kind of glad that the child in my belly hadn't come into this world. The child was so precious. How could it be defiled by such dirty blood from birth? No one can escape the punishment of the law. Raymond and Jocelyn couldn't, and neither could Ryan. I participated in the whole trial as a bystander. Raymond was sentenced to death because his case was especially serious. Jocelyn didn't have much evidence of her crime and was only sentenced to a few months of detention. However, she brought trouble upon herself. She wanted to be released on bail for medical treatment and stopped taking all her medications. Finally, she had a relapse of her heart disease in the detention center and became a vegetable after being rescued. As for Ryan, he didn't argue for himself at all. He looked as if his soul had been taken away, looking at everyone numbly. According to his lawyer, as long as he told the truth, his situation of being unaware could be dealt with leniently. But he firmly insisted that he was an accomplice with Raymond. He didn't want to live. He only asked for the death penalty. When I floated past him, I saw that his eyes were full of tears and he looked so haggard as if he had aged 10 years. He stared fixedly in one direction, his voice hoarse. Astra, wait for me. I'll come to accompany you and the baby soon. I don't want to. I hate Ryan, really, really hate him. The moment I walked out of the court, I stood on the steps where the sun was the hottest. Several strangers who came to observe the trial passed by, some feeling sorry and some feeling heartbroken, but I felt extremely relaxed. I think I knew where my obsession lay. The moment my body was lifted off the ground, I closed my eyes relieved. If only I could do it all over again. Then, I would never choose Ryan again. If possible, I wanted to find that coward. He didn't dare to talk to me, but I did. The busy God probably finally found time to listen to the call deep in my heart. When I opened my eyes again, I didn't see the terrifying ox head and horse face. On a starry night, I was surrounded by roses, candles, and people, and in front of me was Ryan kneeling on one knee. This was the day when Ryan confessed his love to me. Just like in my memory, Ryan in college was young and naive, and his eyes looking at me were full of unwavering love. Astra, be my girlfriend. I promise to love you, cherish you, and take care of you all my life. I'll never let you suffer anyway, Chu. In my previous life, I was drowned in such affectionate eyes and then walked step by step into the abyss. There were people around cheering and helping. But no one would repeat the same mistakes, and neither would Astra. My eyes never fell on him again. Sorry, our horoscopes conflict. I don't think we're suitable. I heard gasps around me and Ryan's incredulous questioning, why? He stood up nervously, wanting to pull me, and the embarrassment on his face was hard to hide. This time, I dodged him resolutely, not even letting him touch the corner of my clothes. What else could it be for? Of course, it was because I had found my own moon. I stepped over the roses and candles and walked into the crowd. Silas was standing among the crowd wearing a baseball cap. He was so inconspicuous, but this time I saw him at a glance. He was also looking at me, and his bright eyes were only on me. This time, I could finally run towards my own happiness without worry. I wanted to tell Silas word by word that there only needs to be one moon in the sky, and another one isn't redundant either, because it can be put in Astra's heart, belonging only to Astra from the inside out.